Welcome in, Georgia Tech fans, to another episode of Swarm Talk here on a Monday evening. It is April 21st, 2025, and we are a decent amount of days away now. Ralph, can you get that for me? How many days away are we from the opening weekend of college football? Tech heads to play Colorado, and it should be fun. It should be fun. Clayton says, nothing makes my day more than waiting on Bryce Kuhn. Welcome in, Altima. Go Jackets. Johnny Reed says, I love the two additions he's developed, the Penn State kid. We're going to talk about who these players are and a little bit more. Maxwell said, "Is told we were live. I apologize. Anthony says, let's go, and we need some D-line. We're going to talk about that here too. And Power Tech says, go Jackets there as well. But hey, you know what? It's going to be a fun night to talk a little bit of transfer portal, a little bit of kind of getting back into the action. So it is interesting there as well. Papa says, Johnny jumping the gun. Man's barely said hello. Yeah, I mean, I think he got that comment in at 7:26, and we tend to go live a little bit past the 7:30 mark. But Ralph has confirmed. Ralph, is that too when Georgia Tech opens? Is that August 30th? Is that the right date? No, they open on that Friday night, so I guess it's 122 days. Ralph will get the final number here in just a second. But welcome in. Make sure you like the video, subscribe on the channel. We appreciate if you're watching over on Twitter, whether it's on the Crowded Booth account or my personal account at Bryce_Kuhn, or on YouTube. To get your comments in and to know when we go live next, make sure you like the video and hit that subscription there as well. Week 0 is 123 days away. So week number 1, specifically for Georgia Tech, playing on that Friday night, 129. Papa Go says he'll be in Boulder. Not to get too much into that, we're going to take a long look at my post-spring expectations and pre-fall expectations and stuff like that. For people going to the game, first off, to me, it's one of those things that I'm kind of excited to see. Just if I was going to the game, and I'm not, but if I was going to the game, just the stadium, that's just a place I'd like to go watch a game, just in terms of Boulder, Colorado, in terms of, just it's a pretty place from everything you got over there. So that'd be a cool place, not a bucket list item necessarily, but a cool place to go watch a game. So that being that, make sure you check out Section 103, our friends over there. Look, they do great work. They do fantastic work. You can check out some of the new gear they have coming up this season. The Haynes King jerseys, I'm sure they'll unveil some new ones. The Brent Key hoodie, and then the Haynes King Tech-like shirt that you can get over there. Use code CrowdedBooth for 10% off your first order there today. But tonight, we're talking about the two additions, what I like about the bolstering of the secondary, if you looked at the thumbnail, and what could come next, right? What is potentially on the docket for what is next. So Ralph's got some stats and info there in the background, and we're going to roll right into it. Ralph, you can go ahead and put up the first banner, which is obviously Georgia Tech makes the addition of Savion Riley, a guy who has, in my opinion, and Ralph, we're going to do this one instead. Who is Savion Riley? I made the ones, that's why. So Savion Riley, who is he? Now, look, it's a guy that is, I would say, for the lack of, I don't know, it's flirted, right? Can we call it that? Get the camera in focus. Has flirted with the potential for playing at Georgia Tech for quite some time now, right? I mean, this is a guy who I think Tech has been interested in at different points. And this is really kind of a former guy from obviously the Kennesaw area. He played one season at Colorado, so coming from Boulder this past year. He was at Miami before that, and then he was at Vanderbilt. And this is a guy who played receiver in high school and played a little bit of both, and signed with Vanderbilt, played 8 games as defensive back in that 2022 or in 2023 season, had redshirted. He had a 12-tackle game, I believe, in 2023, if I'm remembering this right, against Florida. Then we obviously went to Miami, re-entered the portal, all this kind of stuff. So it's really one of those things that, Riley has 2 seasons of eligibility, correct? We're correct in that, and I'm still so tired of this stuff. But He's got 2 seasons of eligibility left. And I think one of the things when we're kind of talking about this is what does he bring to the table? Well, he's a guy that I would say, and we talked about this last, I guess, was it Thursday night? You needed to add probably these guys that have some game experience in terms of the secondary. I like where the secondary is. I told, I told you on Thursday night that I thought there was some good young talent, some good veteran talent. What I think Savion Riley does for you is it bridges the gap between some of the young guys that you're excited about while also providing some good depth, we'll say, some good depth, I'll say that, in terms of backing up. If he is a backup, but I mean, I'm not going to speak because who knows, but backing up some of your starters where it gives you a guy who's taken some snaps. So I like Savion Riley. This is a guy who's going to play safety at the next level. He's going to play safety in terms of probably if he makes it to the NFL in that, but he's going to play safety at Georgia Tech. So I think just in general, what you have here, you have a guy who has played in the SEC. He's played in the, I guess, Big 12 this past year with Colorado. He's played P4 football before, and you kind of needed that in terms of what you had in that room to get you to where you want to go. It's a good depth move. I think it's a security blanket. You know he can play. And look, he might be a guy too that who knows? Could he break out and have a big, summer, a big, fall to where he's a starter for you? I don't know. And Ralph had put together some stats here for you. In 4 games, he, like we talked about, he this past year he had 12 tackles, so didn't play a ton. 48 tackles in 2023 at that Vanderbilt there as well. So I think that this is a solid pickup. It's a good depth pickup. I like where they went with this. They get a guy who's played some football. It bridges the gap. And Ralph, we got some questions. Andrew got a question there. We'll get to that here in just a second. But let's go to the next player, right? So they bring in, I don't want to, I guess calling a veteran, he's been around the game for so long now in Savion Riley. Now they bring in the next iteration of this is a guy who I think is really impressive. Now, look, John Mitchell has not played a lot of college football. Okay. Ralph was getting these numbers for us. This is a guy who only played in 3 games, so preserved the red shirt. He is from Jacksonville, Florida, went to Mandarin High School, I believe, which is where Carson Beck played. I think so. I don't remember that. But had 5 tackles, was a 4-star DB, 5'11", 183. So maybe a little bit in terms of the height, the undersized player. But I also think this is a guy who's a former 4-star. He enters the portal, kind of gets caught in the mix of just being another 3-star. But for Georgia Tech, it's a guy that you can mold. And you just went out and hired a DC whose focus nearly his entire career has been the back end of the defense. So John Mitchell comes in, and that's a guy that you weren't going to get out of the high school ranks. Now that you've gotten him after, just wanted a change of scenery out of the portal, still very moldable in what you want him to be as a college football player. So with these 2 moves, John Mitchell is kind of for the future, where Savion Riley is kind of in terms of the present of what you could bring at Georgia Tech on the back end of the defense. And I think, too, it helps where this I think, too, it helps in terms of just the overall floor of this secondary, right? Because I like some of the young names they have there. Like, I keep talking to people, and they keep talking about Christian Pritchett has the tools to be an ACC starter. You essentially have a scenario where you can manipulate, and I want to be careful how I say this, but you can manipulate playing time for some guys to where they could redshirt but still contribute. I mean, like we know, you can play 4 regular season games and play a bowl game. That's 5, and you still get to hold your red shirt, which I like that aspect of it. So in terms of what these 2 additions provide you is, I think, and Ralph will hit the next banner here, is the secondary development. And I talked about this last Thursday. I really do think that this secondary, the floor has been raised. Now, for me to sit here in late April and tell you that it's going to be X, Y, and Z, that wouldn't be smart. I can't put a definitive in terms of what the ceiling of this group can be. What I can tell you is I think the level of play, the level of competition, and probably the overall talent level, and talking with someone very close to the situation today about this is a group that they feel like inside that building, they have elevated the talent there. It's not a shot to the guys that have gone or guys that are gone or guys that have left. It's really just kind of an indication of where this group has recruited. You give Peoples another year in the system. You get Gideon in there, and you have that. You obviously have Kobe Jones, who I'm just going to tell you right now, talking with people on certain staffs, talking to people that Kobe Jones has interacted with, that is a guy that could be a recruiting star in terms of the coaching position. I don't know what he's like, and we have to remain to be seen. Ralph, you could look this up. Kobe Jones in Alabama, I think he spent just one season as the assistant cornerbacks coach at Alabama under DeBoer, but was hired initially, I think, as an analyst or grad assistant, one of the two, under Saban in his final year. But just in terms of what that room is looking like, you've got Kobe Jones, who is very young, but you're hoping that you've hit kind of a slam dunk or hit a slam dunk. What are we doing? Hit a grand slam in terms of, what you could have there. I like him a lot. Peoples knows the state of Georgia. So you've got that combination, does really well there. And then you bring in Blake Gideon, and it kind of goes to one of the questions we had, and we'll get to here in just a second. It really builds to a crescendo of this secondary must be better. I think they'll be better, but how much better will they be? And that's the difference in determining and why I think, look, you're going to see this over the summer, and I'm right here in the midst of it. This team has the opportunity to go to Charlotte. This position group has to be improved for you to get there. No ifs, ands, buts about it. You can't get the same level of play that you've got in the past couple of years. So is that much better? I think that it is really, really interesting in terms of that there as well. Like I said, love Kobe Jones. I like Corey Peoples. I like Blake Gideon. We talked about that in that long episode we had, when he was hired, going into the schematics, one of my favorite episodes we've done. But I just think in general, we got to see how it happens. We're excited. That's fine. You like some of the recruiting rankings. You like some of the measurables you get out of those guys. And I wanted to go back and read this on John Mitchell. Here was his scouting profile. Andrew Ivins, 24/7 director of scouting, had this. I'll read this for you. A larger cornerback prospect that can go get the football. He tested in the upper percentile the spring before his senior season, posting the highest vertical jump at a camp loaded with talent down in South Florida. Folks, I don't know how much how much you pay attention to recruiting, but when you talk about DBs, okay, and you want to go get yourself a DB, go look at South Florida. Go look at some of the guys that have come out of the Florida region in terms of that. That is, to me, a very good indication. We talk about just measurables and raw talent. Mitchell being from Mandarin and being able to do that is very impressive. He clocked the 8th fastest 40-yard dash that day. Here's kind of the guess you would care about this. He has experience in the high school ranks playing both man and off-man coverage, rather fluid in reverse, and has a good understanding of how to establish inside leverage on the perimeter. Hasn't produced a ton of takeaways, but hasn't exactly been challenged by a ton of opposing quarterbacks. This was in the spring of 23, so before he signed. Should be viewed as a potential multi-year starter at the Power 5 level. Could play likely multiple spots in the secondary, especially after a year or two in a college weight room. His brother, and Ralph, here's another little tidbit for you if you want to look this up. He has a brother, and I don't know if they're still where they are, right? Because, look, the roster fluidity we have in college football is now crazy. 2 brothers, one, Chris Mitchell, that was signed with FIU, I'll say that. And then Nick Mitchell was a linebacker that signed with Mississippi State. I don't know if they're still there in terms of that, but an interesting, tidbit nonetheless. So, Ralph does say Kobe was a GA at Bama in 23, assistant DB coach in 2024. So, to me, it's impressive. I like what John Mitchell has brought. I like the development of this room. And you just have an opportunity with the moves they have made, right? You have an opportunity to be good now. You have an opportunity to be good in the future. But you also have an opportunity here to really just bridge the gap. And I think that's been one of the biggest problems maybe for Georgia Tech and for a lot of programs that are in their position, is that you just kind of have a situation of where, hey, you've got some really good talent on the 2 deep, but you just don't know what you have there. And I just think in terms of raw talent, the measurables, all they wanted to, do there. And Ralph says he has 3 brothers. Justin played at Harvard, Chris at Notre Dame. So Chris transferred from FIU. And then Nick plays at Mississippi State. Okay, so comes from an athletic family. But going back to this, you have a really good opportunity in this secondary with the coaches that they have on staff to build not only a pipeline of wanting to play DB at Georgia Tech, but also build, I just think, continuity to where it's not just 1 year flash in the pan there. You can build a room that if you hold on to them, this can be a place where you can come play DB and go to the next level. I think that really has an opportunity to be that with some of the measurables they have in that room, both for the present and for the future. So I like the secondary for Georgia Tech a lot. All right, so let's talk a little bit, and Ralph, let's get to a couple questions before let's go what's next, and then we'll get to some questions. So, what is next for Georgia Tech? And we kind of hit it right here with the portal rumors. So, a lot of people circling around, and I'm going to check and see if we got a response on this one. So, let's kind of start with, we talked about this last Thursday. I firmly believe, and I said this on Thursday night show, good reason for you to subscribe. I thought they could make 2 additions to this DB room. Are they done there? I believe so right now. What you have an opportunity to do, though, is bolster the front. And you know that Brent Key is going to place a premium on the lines of scrimmage rather than skill position. It's not a knock. It's just the way we talk about sometimes, regardless of who you are, you want to build from inside out, right? You want to, you can't, it doesn't matter what kind of skill talent you have if you don't have lines that can block or you don't have a defensive line to go get the quarterback. And I think that's a concern necessarily for Georgia Tech going into this season is how do you replace some of the losses that you had, the veteran talent. How do you do that? So what is this, Nico? What is that? Also, people not trying to get onto you, Nico. People with the name Nico right now just need to sit this one out. So portal rumors. Let's kind of start with defensive line. Okay. So let's go to the young man from Alabama A&M. Pay has got an offer from Georgia. Georgia went and filled their, I guess, void there over the past couple days. They got the edge rusher from Army. They also got the young man from Miami. Do people not understand what I'm saying here? What the heck? Nico and then okay, I don't know if he doesn't get it. Nico from the Mavericks, and then obviously Nico from the now UCLA quarterback. That's right. So Cedric Smith. Let's talk about him. Cedric Smith, 6'4", 310 pounds. I mean, a guy that is, in my opinion, a guy that really has an opportunity to be that space eater that you need in the middle of this defense. I talked about this too on Thursday and was even thinking about it more and more. Jordan Vandenberg is a disruptor. He really showed that towards the end of the season, and you like what you have out of him in terms of a floor. The problem is beside him, you don't have Zeke Biggers. You don't have someone that at the very minimum is going to hold a double team or just stuff the gap, right? You don't have that, or you just don't know that you have that. There's not a known commodity there that you know can do that. I'm not saying that Cedric Smith is going to come in and just immediately ingrain himself into the system and be just an all ACC second team type of player. What I'm saying is at 6'4", 310 pounds, you should be able to plug a gap. You should be able to maintain your position there and not get pushed around. Tech needs that. So obviously the OV for him is going to be on April 26th. It's a big weekend going into Saturday that we're going to have to keep tabs on. What does that look like? Can they obviously get that commitment? How much does Georgia really need him or want him? Now that they've obviously made, who was Joshua Horton is the guy that they added. So that being said, you have that opportunity right there in front of you, right? With the potential addition of him, it makes me feel better about where you are now. I don't know what the money situation is on the player's side of things. That's part of it, right? I don't know. I can't tell you, hey, here's the figure he's looking for. But, and I pray to God I announce this and I say this name correct, okay? Braxton Feely. That's how I'm going to Feely, however you want to say it. Young man from Boise State. Ralph and I were just talking about this before the show. If Georgia Tech can get Feely, we'll just call him that. He played 12 games last year for the Broncos, so he was on a playoff team, 24 tackles, 5.5 sacks. Ralph, what's that height and weight again? I think I got this one. So he's around 6'2", 296, 295. Could you get him up to 300? Yeah, you probably could. We don't know how he plays there. If you can get this guy, that's the type of player to me who could be not just okay, he's a low floor. He's a potential high ceiling type of player because his production, especially folks from the interior of the defensive line, to get 5.5 sacks on the interior, and when you're not the bona fide guy that's going to be playing, you know, 400 snaps or whatever it is, that shows me production. And what was I got to go back to this because what was the finalist here? So we have Miami's one of the finalists. Ole Miss is one of the finalists. I gotta find that graphic real quick, Ralph. I got you here. So yeah, it's Miami, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Cal, TCU, and Georgia Tech. If you can find a way to if you can find a way to get this guy and win a battle against a guy who is really, really, I want to say developed, but he just this screams splash type of edition in terms of that, making the jump to this level. So altogether, if you can land those two guys, you land one of them, you still feel good. It does beg the question of what else do you need to go to after that? So we've talked about secondaries and kind of okay. Those are two kind of the defensive line guys that we're kind of hearing the most about right now. There's other names. The kid that committed to Wake Forest was an option for them, I think, at one point, but they didn't really like him. Not like him, but Wake Forest just pressed harder at that moment. Let me make sure that there's okay. So a little bit of tidbit of news here. So you go back to the Penn State. Okay, let's talk a little bit of offensive line here. And I hope I say this name right too. So is it? It's JB Nelson. That's who I'm looking at. Right, JB Nelson was a guy that had been kind of linked to Tech a little bit. What's the actual interest there? This is a guy who was a former JUCO player, was I think like a top 5 JUCO player nationally. Really, really like what he could bring to the table. Hasn't played a ton of tackle, but look, folks, he is 6'5", 326 pounds. You can't teach size. And if you can get him in the fray, that to me would be huge, huge on that. Another guy that could be of potential interest, I'm told, is former Creekside offensive lineman there in the Atlanta area. Ralph will love this one. Former South Alabama tackle Jordan Davis was an all-conference player there in Mobile. So you don't need, I guess, you don't need it. You'd like it. So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be very interesting for me to see what is kind of the move they want to make on the trenches. But altogether, defensive line, you have a great opportunity to land. I mean, I'm just telling you, like Braxton Philly, if you can win that battle, holy cow! Like that to me just screams that you can be a player in the portal and that you're serious about going all in 2024. So to me, that's going to be very interesting. So I'll be tuned into that. I'll be tuned into kind of what happens in terms of the trench work. What are they going to look for there? It'll be very, very interesting to kind of see there too. So altogether, it'll be a lot of fun to kind of monitor what happens in the portal. But there's obviously still some moves that can be made. The trenches I expect to be added to. Outside of that, if I'm Georgia Tech and I'm managing that roster, I'm the GM or whoever, whatever role you want to name it. If I'm doing that, I'm glad we shored up the back end. I want to find some trenches because I think that's the difference in being a 7-5 team and being 8-4, 9-3, maybe even more. I think that's the difference. So we'll have to see what happens there. All right, let's get to a couple questions, Ralph. I know we had some start, and then we'll get out of here. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you tune in. And every now and then. Andrew says, do you think Gideon is the reason we keep padding personnel in the secondary versus adding on the D-line where we're bleeding from the most? Good question there, Andrew. He's obviously going to have a focus there, right? And you have to – here's what I say. Ultimate disaster for a team, and I covered a team like this 2 years ago. Ultimate disaster for a team is when you don't have a good front seven and you also don't have a good back 4 or 5, however you want to call it. When you don't have that, you don't have a defense, right? you got to be good somewhere to help alleviate pressure. So, like I said earlier, and I know this question was asked a long time ago, so I may have already answered this. I like that they added the two guys because I feel like you have a guy you can develop for the future, especially when you lost, a young guy to the portal who left already. And then also you added a guy who could probably help you right now and maybe fills the void that a guy like Saeed Gibbs might have left, just in terms of a guy who's played, injuries happen, Savion Riley can do that. So that's kind of there with that. That's what I would say there, Andrew. I think they're looking at defensive line, but you also have to understand, folks, if you are a viable player in the portal, the defensive line, especially the post-spring, it's really advantageous for you to enter because the pickings are slim and a lot of teams have done evaluations and maybe they want to add there. Maybe they want to add there. So it'll be interesting. Okay, next question. Let's rock and roll here. Papa Goat says, I think the secondary could be absolutely disgusting. Mitchell become an instant start alongside Amari. We watched the NC State game. The secondary played pretty well. That's what I expect. Yeah, the only thing I'll say about the NC State game is, and God, what's the kid's name who plays quarterback there? Not a great passer. That would be the only thing. Like, that's not what he was known for. He was a guy who really, really ran the ball.
C.J. Bailey.
C.J. Bailey. Yeah, I mean, I think C.J. Bailey could be a good player, but just not a great – I wouldn't say that – They played well. Yeah, and you didn't allow a bunch of busted coverages, but we'll see. CJ Bailey there, Ramblin says. All right, so next question. Let's keep it rolling. Just keep going. Clayton says, when are the EA football live streams come back? What about Wednesday? We keep rolling with the Berry College aspect there. Be interesting. TD, did Akilo Stone enter the transfer portal again? Nancy, yes, he did, and that's an intriguing option. I will say this. I talked with somebody. There are several SEC schools that would want to add him, but they can't because of the inter-SEC, transfer rule. So it does open the door. Now, I will say this. I think the way that he left Georgia Tech could be frowned upon. A lot of that same staff isn't there, but Key is, right? And Key knows how that went down. So would he be welcome back? We'll see. I'm not too sure on that aspect. But Nancy, he is in the portal again. I can tell you firsthand, there's 2 SEC teams that were interested, but they can't go get him. What's his market going to be? That'll be interesting to see there as well. So, and Papa Go says this, I think he'll have a bigger market. Yeah, I mean, he's a good football player. And look, he benefited from leaving, benefited from leaving Georgia Tech, going to Ole Miss, upping his stock. And now could he benefit again? We'll see. I mean, you can't blame the kid. I don't know. It is very interesting. So, yeah, there you go. Is that the end of the questions, Ralph? It is? Well, hey, look, we appreciate you hanging out. We appreciate all the comments, the live comments there as well. We're going to be live and rolling a lot. We'll be talking a lot. It'll be very interesting to kind of see where Georgia Tech goes from here. And the best way you can stay in the know is going to be just like and subscribe to the channel. Completely free for you to do. It'll be a lot of fun. Gavin says pony up. We're going to get that out here very, very soon as well. And then last thing. Thursday night is the NFL draft. If you missed this last year, the absolute melt that Will and I had live, just wait till pick 15 rolls around. It'll be so interesting. Why do you have a cock helmet there? I'll read that out loud. Not afraid. I'm a man. When you're friends of the program, that's all I gotta say. When you're friends of the program, that's when they send you stuff. So we got, I don't know where I put the SMU hat. But, we got a lot of cool stuff there. There you go. So, you know what? Support the brand. But, hey, we will we'll see you. We appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you like the channel. Subscribe to the channel. Talk to us and leave in the comments below. What do you think about these additions? I like them. I think it's trending really well. I like the coaching staff defensively. I'm ready to see them go to work here in the fall as well. But we'll have kind of post-spring portal position evaluations. We'll get that on the channel here pretty soon. It'll be a lot of fun to talk about. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time here on Swarm Talk, brought to you by the Grata Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The crowded booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Coon.